Michael, and I've been making some recordings of me reading children's books to children for some of the kids, but I also thought that maybe it would be good to read something for somebody a little bit older, so for some teenagers and even some adults. And so I'm going to start with a book that I actually wrote under my pen name, Michael Saenz. And the book is called The 1,000 Natural Shocks. And I wrote this book a few years back, and then my husband and I published it together, and he created this beautiful book cover and designed the layout of the book, which is really cool. And we even got some illustrations. There's some illustrations for it that we had done. And this book is, I wouldn't say it's autobiographical, but it's some of the things that happened in this book happened to me. And it's about a guy named Charles Siskin, a boy named Charles Siskin, who starts his first year of high school. And so I'm going to read this in installments and maybe read a couple of chapters at a time until I get through the whole thing. It's not a very long book, but hopefully you'll enjoy it. So this is The 1,000 Natural Shocks by Michael Saenz. Illustrations are by Alex Fox. This book is for my mother, who made it easy, and for my sister, who listened without judgment, and for my brother, who stood up for me. It starts with an introduction, a word from the author. I think it's important to say a word or two about why I wrote this book and who the book is for. Many people will look at it and think that it fits in a specific category or that it doesn't fit into any. And I guess they would all be right. This book is not necessarily just for teenagers, although it is about a teenager and takes place during his early high school years. But by the same token, it is not intended just for adults. Although the time period will bring back many fond memories of those of the older set. This book is not just for gay or questioning teens, or just for teens who self-identify as straight either. The themes are mature, but there is nothing gratuitous or salacious about it. I wrote this story as a story for almost anyone. I intended it to be read by parents and their children, by people of any sexual orientation, and by anyone who has been bullied or who has bullied or who remembers what a terrible and wonderful time high school can be. I would like this to be a story that will start a conversation, or maybe a whole lot of conversations, among people who may believe that they have nothing in common. And maybe after these conversations, the reader might find her or himself a little closer to someone they previously thought was completely foreign to her or him. Most of all, I would like this to be a story that offers hope. This is the introduction. This is the introduction to my story. I have been told that introductions should be short, snappy, and to the point. It kind of doesn't really matter to me because I usually skip the introduction when I'm reading a book, and I'm not really sure why a book needs an introduction when I think it's better to just get right to the story. I guess it makes the story seem classy or important, so I'll give it a shot. My name is Charles Siskin. Nobody calls me Charlie or Chuck or Chuckles or Big C or anything like that. Everyone just calls me Charles. That's about the only bit of real logistical information that you're going to get. There are a lot of things that I won't explain in this story. Or maybe I should say there are a lot of things that I won't explain in this narrative. Footnote number 1, narrative. Narrative. Noun. A telling of events either true or fictional, a story. 2, a work of literature or a book that combines the representation of an event, that contains the representation of an event or story. 3, the practice, technique, or art of narrating. Here's a perfect example. This book is a narrative. My creative writing teacher, Brother Marvin, says I should practice using my vocabulary and saying exactly what I mean, but I also know that looking up a bunch of words in the dictionary can be a pain in the ass. So I have included, for your convenience, a handy set of footnotes on all of the new words I learned my freshman year. The definitions are official and correct and actually taken from the dictionary, but that seemed a little dry, so I've included my own little additions. You know, I think it's kind of funny how knowing and using a lot of words can be really great in some places and can get you into a shitload of trouble in others. Like in class, teachers really pant and wheeze and get all excited when you use a lot of big words. On the other hand, if you use those same words in regular conversations with friends or students or other ordinary people, they think you're a snob or a teacher's pet or a wuss, and sometimes that leads to getting the crap kicked out of you. Which brings me to an important point. I'll be leaving a lot of details out of this narrative. They won't be the kind of details that someone reading this absolutely has to know, but I won't tell you what city I'm in or what the real name of the school is, and all the names, except for mine, will be changed to protect the innocent and the guilty. But these kinds of details aren't that important. The important things, like the events, are real. Just imagine that this story is happening in any city in America, maybe in any city in the world. I have to believe that my story is not so uncommon. Even though I might feel like I'm the only weirdo like me in the whole universe, that can't be true. There must be boys like me all over the place. There must be. I have to believe that. If I don't believe it, then what's the point? So ends the introduction. As a start, I would say that this introduction has really classed the hell out of this story so far. What do you think? Part 1, The Undiscovered Country. Presenting Chapter 1. I'm going to do my best to keep the story organized. I have a tendency to ramble, so with this in mind, I will start at the beginning of my life and give you a little background information about me so that you can understand me better as a character and empathize. Footnote 2. Empathize, verb, to experience empathy. His account of the events allowed me to empathize with his experience. I don't understand why they're always telling you that you can't define a word by using the word in the definition, and then you look in the dictionary and they do exactly that. So to clarify, empathy is the ability to identify with or imagine what it's like to feel the feelings or think the thoughts of another person. Empathy. Anyway, so that you can understand me better as a character and empathize with me and some of the effed up things that happened to me, and the even more effed up things I did in response to the effed up things that happened to me. Brother Marvin would be so proud. Maybe I should cool it on the use of terms like effed up. Well, at least he would approve of my attempts to organize my thoughts and events into some semblance of order. Here's the order I choose. Chronological. Footnote 3. Chronological. Adjective. Arranged in or according to the order of time. He told the events in chronological order. 2. Relating to chronology. Chronological age. I'm sure that I really succeeded in putting the events of this story in the order that they happened. Looking back over it, I think I may have jumped around a little, but you get the gist. So, chapter 1 begins with my childhood. I was a pretty happy child, but then again, I didn't know any better. You should probably know that I am an only child. Thank God for small favors. When I was very young, 3 or so, I was really cute, if you can believe the pictures. And my mom used to dress me in natty little outfits like shorts and crisp white shirts and bow ties and the occasional blazer. If you go by the pictures, it looked like I was always ready to step onto a yacht or attend a summer party thrown by the Great Gatsby. My hair was always combed and slicked down, and I never had any bruises or scrapes on my knees. I don't remember a lot from my childhood. I think I have a tendency to forget everything as soon as it happens, which makes for a really good reason to write this book, so I don't forget it all before I hit my sophomore year. But there are a couple of salient, footnote 4, salient, adjective, that which moves by leaps or springs, jumping. 2, jetting or projecting upward, a salient spring of water. 3, an outstanding or pertinent feature. 4, prominent or standing out of notable significance. I always get this word confused with saline, like the saline solution we used in biology class. But there are a couple of salient, go Brother Marvin, points that I do remember that I will provide you, the reader, with great insight into who I am. Let's start with elementary school. I love my parents, but they probably didn't do me any favors by starting me out in school a year early. My birthday was in November, which was right on the cutoff date or something. My mom says it was because I was really verbal and very clearly ahead of other 4-year-olds. But by the time I hit kindergarten, I already knew my alphabet and could read Dick and Jane. They even had me see a shrink to see if I could handle the stress of being younger than everybody else. Apparently I could. And even more unusual, when I was in the 1st grade, I was in love with most of the boys in my class. Now, it may be at this point that I lose a good number of readers. Oh, we didn't know it was going to be one of those kinds of books, you may be thinking. We like stories about normal people doing normal things, like a boy playing with trucks and coming of age and falling in love with a girl who is slightly out of his league, but his winning personality causes her to reevaluate her previous standards, and she breaks up with her football player boyfriend in a juicy scene that takes place in the cafeteria, and she sees that there is so much more to a person than just muscles, and she and the hero go to the prom together and dance to a song by Spandau Ballet. I feel really bad that I'm disappointing you so early in the story, but this is not that kind of book. Maybe I should have mentioned this in the introduction. So much for great organization. Somewhere Brother Marvin is clucking his tongue and shaking his head. If it's any consolation, I was in love with most of the girls too, but in an entirely different way. Now, you might ask yourself, how can a 1st grader know that he is in love with anyone? But I assure you that it was true. Despite my deviant, footnote 5, deviant, adjective, straying from the accepted norm, especially in regards to behavior. Noun, 2, that which deviates from the norm. You know, like a pervert. But despite my deviant tendencies, I was a very loving little boy. Just ask my mother. There were times when I was so loving that she would have to encourage me to go outside and play or go watch TV or something because I was driving her crazy with my clinginess and need for hugs and attention. So anyway, back to the boys. I remember being in love with most of the boys in my class at Woodvale Elementary. It was kind of like they were another species. They were rough and strong and didn't seem to mind getting dirty, and I really wanted to kiss a good number of them. I'm pretty sure I was foreign to them as they were to me, and they mostly avoided me or called me names. The only exception was a boy named Billy Burlington, who at the time seemed like he was 6'4". He was taller than the other boys, and I guess he was pretty dumb because he didn't have the sense to avoid me the way they did. Or maybe it was just because he sat next to me and he felt like he had to talk to me. Once when we were in the bathroom, he showed me his wiener, very casual and offhand, like it was a marble he carried around in his pocket or something. Oddly enough, he was one of the few boys in the class that I didn't want to kiss, but we were very good friends. So as I said, the boys tended to avoid me, which was okay by me because I preferred to hang out with the girls. I liked the games they played, I liked the stuff they talked about, and they were fun. And for the most part, they weren't mean to me like the boys could be. They didn't push me down or tell me to beat it or call me names like Crybaby or Cream Puff. And the girls were pretty. They combed their hair and they kept their clothes neat like I did and were just generally less foreign than the boys. Even though I don't remember a whole lot about this time, as I previously stated, I do remember one incident that makes me cringe when I look back on it now. One day, our teacher, Mrs. Horsford, we all called her Mrs. Horseface behind her back, was absent and we had a substitute. Unlike Mrs. Horseface, The son was young and pretty and didn't give us prunes as an afternoon snack. At any rate, she was young and pretty and cool. And as usually happens when there is a sub, we didn't do a lot of work that day. At one point, right after recess, she asked the class if anyone wanted to have a talent show. Of course we did. This was when I decided it was time to make my theatrical debut. With 4 of my best little girlfriends, I decided we would perform our version of Spoonful of Sugar from the movie Mary Poppins. I know. But I had the record at home. I listened to it all the time, and it was one of my favorite movies. So we went out into the hall, practiced it, and then came back in and performed it for the whole class. The only thing that saves this story from being entirely horrifying is that when the rest of the class, especially the boys, stared at us slack-jawed in disbelief as we sang and danced this awesome sub, I can't for the life of me remember her name, saved us from utter humiliation by joining in on the last chorus. And I loved her for that. Needless to say, with events like these popping up all over my childhood, I spent a good deal of my time becoming more and more isolated from the norm. To make things worse, I was so ahead of everybody else that my parents thought it would be a good idea if I skipped a grade. I guess I seemed like I was bored, which made me disrupt the class a lot with my constant fidgeting and insistence on talking nonstop to anyone within earshot. So after elementary school, up a grade I went. Also, I was an odd, effeminate little boy, and the older I got, the stranger my classmates thought I was. By the time I moved on to John Glenn Middle School, I was pretty much, get ready for this one, Brother Marvin, a pariah. Footnote 6, pariah, noun. 1, a member of the low caste in southern India. 2, a person who is outcast or avoided, an outcast. I always thought this word would make a dandy first name, if it didn't mean what it meant, But by the time I got to John Glenn Middle School, I was a pariah and spent most of my time alone. My weird personality, namely a fussy way of dressing, a clearly feminine way of talking and walking, a dislike for sports or other typically boy-type pastimes, which could be put down as just a little odd when I was in elementary school, couldn't be so easily ignored in middle school. In middle school, everything is about being normal, especially when it comes to how boys should act and how girls should act. 7th grade was the first time I got called gay and queer and a fag. By the time I reached 8th grade, it was pretty bad. I don't think I had a single friend, and just the thought of going to school each day was misery, which really sucked because I genuinely liked school, classes. I enjoyed learning and ended up spending most of my time talking to my teachers and wishing I was an adult. I gradually began to realize that I didn't understand kids my age. They seemed to speak a different language from me, and they were interested in all kinds of strange things. Even the girls, who up until middle school had been my friends, started to change. All the boys seemed to want to do was fight or play sports or make stupid jokes about dicks. And the girls suddenly became obsessed with gossiping and fixing their hair and going to dances. I spent most of my time reading. On any given day, you could find me walking around the halls with a copy of Alex Haley's Roots or Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind tucked under my arm, and I stood far apart from everyone, watching these alien children as they crowded the halls and spoke to each other about things that I thought were stupid or unimportant. I wondered how the hell I got to this place called middle school and what I was doing here. Was I sent from another galaxy to study an alien life form? A primitive culture on an unexplored planet? It seemed so unfair. Even though I was pretty miserable, I somehow never seemed to put the blame for my situation on myself. I never asked myself, what's wrong with me? But instead asked myself, what's wrong with everyone else? It's true that there were a couple of moments when I sat outside on the bleachers, overlooking the sports field, wallowing in self-pity and thinking it might be easier if I just killed myself. But I couldn't imagine how I would do it. And besides, why should I kill myself when there's nothing wrong with me and everyone else is an asshole? That seemed really unfair. But the prospect of enduring 4 years in high school seemed unbearable. The public high school that I was set to attend was called James Madison High School. It was located about a 10-minute drive away from John Glenn. And I felt pretty sure that it was just going to be a bigger, more intense version of the middle school hell I was in now. In spite of whatever strength I had developed to stand up to the daily tortures and humiliations of middle school, I didn't think I was going to survive 4 more years of the same and worse at James Madison. So what could I do? That's the end of chapter 1. I'll do another chapter later. Thanks.